Hello and welcome to another segment, episode, part of our lives here, me and Willards, dedicated to you, dedicated to the craft that you are pursuing, craft of architecture and building beautiful buildings and making humanity better place, better. Let's say not better place, better. And we hope to help you make you just a little bit better at doing this. And Willard and I have been at it for a little bit now, and we're focusing on going from AutoCAD design methodology to ArchiCAD. And the last episode, if you didn't watch it, we covered 10 commandments, right, Willard?
Yeah.
He came up with it. It's 10 reasons why. I said 11 before, but it's 10. It's 10. We're keeping it nice and neat. 10 reasons, or I guess 10 steps to convert from AutoCAD to ArchiCAD. And we went into some detail on each one of those. And if you haven't heard that episode, you should go back and see, because that really paints the picture of what the conversion may look like and helps you decide on whether this is something you want to pursue. You want to pursue this for sure, but the question is like when, right? And today we're going to dive a little deeper. Today we're going to parachute into number one and do some exploring, right, Willard?
Yes, sir.
You ready to do some exploring?
Yes, some spelunking.
Yeah, we'll splunk down. All right. And the topic today is within the realm of conversion. The step number one is evaluating project requirements. And so there's a bunch of other things under this we can go into, but Willard, why don't I let you introduce the topic in more depth, and then we can just kind of dive in.
Yeah. So, I guess in the kind of macro view of preparing yourself and your team to transition from AutoCAD to ArchiCAD, the first kind of component of that is evaluating the project requirements. So, before you get started in this conversion process, you want to understand what your project needs are, what the project is going to require from you and your team, the timeline of the project itself, who's going to be working on the project in terms of the team itself. So if you have more junior or more senior staff that are going to be needed for the project, or a mixture of that, just understanding kind of that hierarchy and the team dynamics that you're going to be leveraging for that project. And then what your expectations are for that project specifically. If you're trying to make this a keystone project where people will be able to, use this as a reference in the future to the skills and abilities that your team has the ability to leverage, that's something to consider. Or if you're just trying to get something out the door as quickly as possible, that's definitely another kind of component to keep in mind. And as you're evaluating this project, your team, you can start to understand some of the more minute or finite aspects within ArchiCAD that will help you, that you'll need to leverage or better understand to be efficient in this process.
Okay. What about timeline? I think we covered that a little bit, and don't worry about repeating ourselves a little bit. Not everybody listens to every minute of what we talk about. So I think it's a pertinent question here is to, say maybe it's an architecture firm of 20 people. What's the timeline for, if you focus on this conversion, what's the timeline to get this done and start pumping projects in ArchiCAD?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, the timeline question, in a lot of ways depends on how many dedicated individuals you're going to kind of assign to the conversion or transition process. So if this is, a firm of 20 people and there are 2 to 3 people that will be able to spearhead the conversion process or kind of translation of historical information, it's going to be a far quicker path. And I think if you're starting with, you know, let's just say, I don't know, a 20,000 square foot building, or, even like a 5,000 square foot house. And, if you have 2 to 3 people that are dedicated to ensuring that that project is going to leverage all or a lot of the components within the application itself, I would guess that, you know, depending on their background and their skill set, it could be a very quick process. I would say that, within, don't quote me on this, but I'd
Yeah.
say within 32 hours, you should have a pretty good idea of the things that, I would say within 32 hours, you should have a pretty good idea of how long it's going to take you to do the project. And I would say that almost, within 40 hours, um, spread out amongst 3 people, you should feel pretty comfortable, kind of diving into that fully immersed conversion of a project or starting a project. So that's kind of a long story. I think it all depends on team dynamics, dedication, background, and things like that. But I don't think it's a very long process at all. And I don't think that the time frame for an office to convert should be one of the. I think it should be the least, one of the less daunting aspects of the process, even though, time is money, and having people trying to figure things out seems a little bit nebulous and can be a little bit stressful. Especially, I think that I'm kind of rambling here, but one of the things I think that is potentially hard for organizations is that typically within an organization, there is a group of people that are very experienced in the ability to bring drawings to fruition, or a project or an idea to getting a permit. And they have done that hundreds of times or thousands of times, and they know exactly what they need to do to be able to do that. And I think one of the things that's hard with converting from AutoCAD or any other software to ArchiCAD is that you might not have a group or the expertise inside of the organization that has ever done that before. And so when it becomes like a nebulous kind of effort, that becomes a little bit uncomfortable for organizations. And I've seen this time and time again in converting groups or training people, is the uncomfortable level that leadership has with not knowing exactly how long it's going to take to kind of complete this process. But it shouldn't take that long.
Okay. I mean, you make me feel better about this. You've done, I don't know how many hundreds or dozens of these conversions, or you've advised firms on the process. So, coming from you, I mean, who can better assess it? Listen to your software salesman? I don't know. Listen to Willard. That's what I say. Okay. Let's talk about this initial stage. And let's bring some of your experience in. Maybe give some examples. You don't need to give company names, but maybe some examples. What's some of the pitfalls at this stage? What people underestimate or overestimate? Where do you see people going a little bit sideways, where you want to straighten them out and help them get to that quicker timeline?
Oh, that's one of my favorite questions, really, because what it is that I've seen where people get lost is the look or the personalization of the information that they're producing. So that comes into the templates, or that comes into how the sheets look, or even the renderings, or the section cuts, or the leaders of the, so like if you have like something that's pointing to something in that text box. And I have seen the number one thing that I see time and time again is people really get focused in on that. And I think that it makes sense, especially in architecture, because a lot of our craft is the representation of information on a set of documents, and then we hold a lot of value in how that information looks. And so that becomes a little bit difficult in terms of adhering to certain things and then staying inside of that. So people get stuck in that for sure.
So they feel like they're losing their identity maybe a little bit, and they're kind of start scrambling and panicking a little bit.
Well, no,
Right.
it's more of they see a sheet of information, and even though technically it represents everything that they're looking for in terms of the technical information that's on the sheet, they want it to be highlighted so that it shows like, very specific text or very specific, like the line weights or something like that. And so that becomes a little bit complicated because sometimes the way that it looks by being hand drawn can look a little bit different when it is digitized or being represented. So teams get hung up on like how it looks on the sheet, and then that becomes a little bit complicated.
So your advice to that is what?
My advice is to, really my advice is to get the information onto the sheet as quickly as possible, and just represent it as quickly as possible that is sufficient for you to achieve your goals. I think that I can understand that if you're presenting documents to a client or to an authority having jurisdiction, that it can be a little bit like there can be a pride issue that's associated with what that information looks like, or it can just be, you are a well-known architect and you do not want your drawings to look a certain way. Um, but I guess I would just hesitate on like trying to represent that information too complex in a way that's too complex for you to be able to represent it quickly. So that becomes a little bit like, I guess the thing is just get the information onto the sheet first, and then when you build the skill set in terms of making the refinements that you need, make that a second priority to production. So that would be my
All right. So
advice.
may I surface this out if I and please feel free to correct me. So make production first priority during that initial stage of the project requirement evaluation, and production priority number one, because template creation and stylization and drawing styles, all that stuff, we listed as step 5. Before that step, we're going to do training. We're going to do data migration. There's a lot there. We're going to do model reconstruction. All those steps you listed before template creation styles, right? There's a reason for that. Is this the reason? Because you want the team to be production focused initially and then grow into this
Yeah.
style. So that's a very, very interesting and I think observation or advice, because I can totally see, even not being an architect myself, I can totally see how I would spend a lot of time, trying to pretty up my blog post if I switched, say, platforms. Let's say I went from Wix to WordPress or vice versa, whatever, and I wanted to look this certain way. But my deadline is I got to publish every Thursday. My listeners, my viewers are expecting it. But I'm so caught up in details that the quality of the content is jeopardized a little bit. Is that an analogy?
Exactly.
All right. So,
and that literally is the biggest issue that I've seen. And one of the most frustrating issues for teams is that you miss the production. You're not actually doing the building that you need to be building. And you're focused on how it looks on the sheet, but not necessarily the reason why you bought this really expensive software, which is you want the BIM out of it. You want, these other components out of it. You want the ability to share information. You want the ability to have a team that works collaboratively in it. And I think you could give little pieces of this design exercise to senior architects who are likely never going to necessarily dive into the weeds of ArchiCAD. But if you want them to, start to make comments on how it looks, save that until everybody is up to, 75% capacity or capabilities and chugging along. And then you can start to look at how it looks. But that's exactly the analogy, is that you're sacrificing the content for the look.
I don't know why this quote came in my mind, man. It's it's like this tech bro thing. So screw it, ship it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not screw it. It's the F word, which we're not going to use on this podcast. But gotta ship it, ship work, right?
Totally. And then really, what it's same idea is like the MVP. The minimum viable product. What do I need to put onto a sheet to get a permit? What do I need to represent the information in a way and that's what I get away from, or have gotten away from, or kind of slide through the way it looks on the sheet, is that instead of presenting a bunch of flat information to a client, is never show them flat information, only show them three-dimensional information from the beginning. So you've already set the expectation that the information that they're going to be looking at is digestible by them. And then they're never looking at your sheet drawings. And the only teams that are looking at your sheet drawings are the guys in the field, or, the jurisdiction having authority. And then, maybe tangentially, or, as contractually required, the client, but focus on shipping the product.
Very sage advice. Now let's pick apart a couple more nuggets of wisdom here within this initial stage. So when you're evaluating the project requirements, you said something about, which I don't understand, and hopefully you can explain to us, BIM workflow expectation. What is that? How do you set that expectation? What is it?
Your workflow expectations within the BIM environment, that would be how you are structuring your team. So if we're going back to AutoCAD times, you would have an architect who is sketching maybe by hand or in SketchUp or something like that, and they're producing this initial idea, potentially, or they're doing it in whatever authoring software that you're using, and then they're giving it to the draftsman, and then it's coming back through this production workflow. And then BIM's a little bit different. So you're now having to understand how your team is functioning inside of that environment. So yeah, you might have somebody who's still doing drafting. You might actually have somebody who needs to skill up a little bit and understand how to, potentially create objects, or how to schedule objects, or add information into the objects, and then you also have to see how your senior leadership is going to interact with this information as well. So there's, I guess it would be kind of looking at it in terms of dimensionality of, typical workflow dimensionality is pretty flat. But then as you get into the BIM environment, it becomes more multi-dimensional, and I'm thinking of this as more of a physics dimensionality um, where it's time, space, and all this other time travel. In a
Continuum. Yeah.
sense, yeah, space time continuum versus like just like a block or whatever. But yeah, you're having to understand a little bit more of how you are going to work in that environment. So just understanding it, the depth of your workflow.
So
So yeah, so exchanging the information and all the different kind of components to that. And I don't think it's that, it's not that much to ask, a person who's experienced with leading a team or even an inexperienced team to say, like, where am I going to fit into this process?
So you recommending to do this in step one. I want to poke at that for a second. How, like, if I don't know what the process is going to be like, or I've studied up a little bit, would it suffice for me to have my process really well documented and understood in order to start mapping BIM workflows, or how do firms go about this? Or how do you advise them to do it?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, because what I do, I would, so I think there's a couple different ways to do this. And, there's so many similarities, and especially you guys are in Silicon Valley. So, and Autodesk is in Silicon Valley. I guess you call it Silicon Valley. But I think and then just in generally, like, what is interesting is all these platforms, BIM, ArchiCAD, Revit, all these Autodesk, are all built on a software platform. So, well, I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, you can look at this in a few different methods. And then what I've done is I've looked at how software development approaches problems that are complex. Because I think what software development has done, which architects have historically done, is think about complex problems, and trying to find the most efficient solution and leverage the resources they have in the most efficient manner to execute the problem, or solve the problem. And so what I've seen is that you can do like a waterfall method. So you can look at your actual process. I am designing this $20 million, 50,000 square foot building. And I need to do X, Y, Z, and all these different features. And typically in my current workflow, Sam and Bobby are doing, part one of that series. And it can be a water flow method where you complete one task and you start another task. I think that, there's another method where you can use like agile, where you are in, or you can use something like Scrum, where you just have everybody in a room, and everybody, instead of being pigeonholed into their skill set, you can say, what, who has an interest in, doing part one of this, and then you have volunteers who kind of look at that, and so I think that there's multiple different ways to look at how you go about assessing kind of the workflow itself. And then what I also use is a tool called FreeMind. It's an open source mind mapping application. And the reason I use like a mind mapping tool instead of like a listing tool, or even like a scheduling tool like Microsoft Project for some of this, is because I want to see the organic kind of associations that come with laying it out. So if I have project one and I create the mind map, and task one is to create a site plan, And then I list all the things that I need to do within that bubble. And it shows that I have 10 things I need to do to be able to complete that site plan. And then I have this other phase 2 task. I think those are ways to more easily assess what the workflow is going to eventually be in a more organic way. And, you know, I think it's one thing that I think is really unique is that this is a really great opportunity for firms because, or groups or individuals, because how often is it that you need to reassess your process and say, am I doing this the most efficient way possible? Or is my end result the final product that I have been trying to achieve through whatever 25 years of doing it this one way or 10 years of doing it this other way? This kind of gives you that reset button, as comfortable or uncomfortable as it may seem. It's a great opportunity to really step back and say, okay, like, even though I've been doing it this way, now I have this new tool and I potentially could be doing it another way, or the way that I was doing it, even just looking at it, looks like it could have been, readjusted to be a little bit more efficient.
Hmm. Do you advise in your role as a consultant for these conversions? Do you advise people in this process? Is this a big part of what you do? The firms kind of ask you a lot of questions along those lines, or you wish they would and they don't as much?
I think it is definitely a part of the process, whether it's overtly discussed or not. Um, this ultimately, because it's so essential to a successful deployment and adoption, that it becomes kind of an essential part of it. But it would be a lot easier if firms were more open to kind of exposing themselves, their feelings, and their workflows and things like that in a more open and approachable manner, to make this process a little bit more efficient. Because I think once you kind of solve, at least this piece mentally, it's the rest of it falls into place.
Hmm. Very cool. So I think unless do you have so I like so far we've really surfaced two kind of key aspects of the successful conversion, this first step, evaluating the project. And that, in my opinion, well, my opinion, what I heard is number one, ship it, so to speak, focus on production versus how your drawing looks right off the bat. And then you work on how it looks, step 5 or somewhere there. And then the second is invest in evaluating your process and mapping or opportunistically view BIM workflow as a way to improve your organizational delivery, overall efficiency. Those two, right? You you with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to, I guess, want the caveat, the ship it. I understand that we have contractual obligations of how we need to show and represent information. But once you get at least, to a baseline clarity of that, yeah, ship it.
Yeah, don't ship crap. That's not our advice.
Don't ship it backwards or upside down. Um,
Yeah. Um, all right. I think this is good. Unless you have give it a second and remember a few transitions in that initial first step you helped with. Any other any other gotchas come to mind or things you would advise people to take on this start of the process, this early in the process?
yeah, I mean, I think one thing that, like, when you're starting kind of this evaluation process, um, and trying to be flexible in both understanding what it is that you are, how you're doing things currently, and then how you could be doing things. Um, I think one thing that in that vein of ship it, I think that there is some shedding of expectations, or like, don't hold on to anything that is not ex- that is not essential to you getting that project moving forward. And the reason the why I bring this up is when you're asking about, like, things that I've seen that could potentially be like minefields for organization, is how things are labeled, or what you like, the naming convention that you're using for internal things inside of the application. um, I would just caution teams and say, you know how much time do you want to spend on changing everything, or just changing the things that directly improve efficiency?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. I think this was a good round out. So if you're still listening, we appreciate your consideration. Hopefully you know, we'll have added some value to this, to your thinking along these lines. And if you need help, we are getarchit.com, and we're ArchiCAD. So we help, architects, the best architects in the world, take care of their IT. So, if your IT is taken care of, you can focus on running your business. As well as we have resources to help you with the conversion itself, as well as ongoing management of ArchiCAD and this new realm of BIM. So we're here to help, and find us at getarchit.com. Willard, any parting words of wisdom? Because I think we dropped a lot here today, a couple bombs. We parachuted in. We accomplished our mission. We get in the helicopter. How you feel?
Good, good. I think just the parting words would be ship it, right?
Love it. All right, my friend. Good to see you again. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next show. And meantime, stay true to yourself and build a good company and build good the rest of the world for us. And we're very much appreciated here. Thank you for watching. See you next time.